Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel. I apologize, it's been several months since I've produced a video. It's been a real crazy time for me with work and home and everything, and just other priorities have taken place, and now that it's winter time, I'll be able to spend a little bit more time with my layout. Today I'm going to do a brief review of scaletrains.com EMD SD40-2 EMD lease, road number 6305, and this is an ex-Milwaukee unit. I'm just going to talk a little bit as I unpackage the locomotive here. This really doesn't go too well with the theme of my layout. Obviously you all know that I'm mostly Illinois Central, Chicago Central, Illinois Central Gulf. Mostly in the mid 80s. This particular unit was fully operational in the 1980s on the Milwaukee Road. Eventually it became part of the Soo line in the late 80s, and after the Soo line was essentially acquired, this particular locomotive became part of the EMD leasing operation. So even though this is not an Illinois Central or anything that I particularly model, I thought that, number one, I really wanted to get a Scaletrains locomotive. I don't really have any need for any of the GEVOs or the Tier 4s or any of the dash units. So the SD40-2s really operationally fall in within the timeline of my layout. I really wanted to get one of these to test it out in the hopes at some point in the future scaletrains.com might actually produce a Illinois Central paint scheme in one of their locomotives. I've heard really good things about Scaletrain manufacturing, their attention to detail, very initial impressions out of the box. This is very similarly packaged to any of the Ather and Genesis units, just in terms of the packaging, the blister. One unique little thing here, there are these little caps over the trucks that just help it secure within the packaging a little bit better. But otherwise it's packaged very similar to an Ather or a Walther's proto unit. So as I said a little bit about the history of this particular locomotive, it started its life as a Milwaukee Road unit, eventually became part of the Soo line. You can tell that Scaletrains sort of blacked out some of the Soo line. The original road number for the Milwaukee Road was road number 21. You can see right there on the dynamic brake fan on the long hood, you can see that the number 21 is sort of shaded out, patched out. The Soo line is a little bit patched out. You can see a little bit more in detail here about the paint. Again, the back of the Milwaukee Road is painted out, patched out. There's an EMD logo on it. So this was Milwaukee Road number 21. It became Soo line number 6305. Then it became the EMD leasing unit 6305, and then it actually had iterations after it served as an EMD lease unit. So a couple things I'm just paying attention here. Again, this is my first time out of the package. All of the stanchions and everything appear to be firmly in place. A lot of detail on the trucks, a lot of detail on the locomotive itself. So I'm really excited. Like I said, I wanted to get a Scaletrains locomotive, run it on my layout a little bit. These leased units spent the majority of their time on the Burlington Northern and the Southern Pacific in the early 1990s. If you recall, Illinois Central purchased a a large amount of secondhand SD40-2s from the Burlington Northern, painted them in the Illinois Central all black. So it's possible, it's absolutely possible that one of these EMD lease units could have found their way onto the Illinois Central, either if they were leased out to the Burlington Northern or if Illinois Central just flat out leased them from EMD. So I figured I'd give it a whirl, and let's go ahead and test this thing out. So I'm sure by now all of you know that I have a ProtoThrottle and pretty much have exclusively run all of my trains using the ProtoThrottle since I got it. I don't have this locomotive set up yet for the ProtoThrottle, so I'm actually just going to go ahead and use my Digitrax DT402 to do the initial test run and run through the initial operations. So this is default package right out of the box, or default programming. So Scale Trains has their locomotives default to an address of 03. Go ahead and hit track power here. So you can hear the locomotive as the track power is applied. The prime mover hasn't started yet. Hit F8 and that initiates the startup sequence. I'm just going to real quick run through some of the operations here of the functions. So F0 should be the headlight. Nice LED, you can see that come on between the number boards. This is directional, so we'll go ahead and put it in reverse. Turn those back off. F1 should be the bell. F2 should be the horn. F3 is the coupler. There's the release. F4 is dynamic brake. When it's moving, it's idle. If it's at it lowers the RPMs if the locomotive's idle, so here you can hear it lowered the RPMs. F5 are going to be the class lights, so watch right here next to the EMD sign. So the initial pressing of F5 turns on the clear white. The second, the class lights turn green. The third, they turn red. Fourth time they cycle out. So that's a really cool feature. I think Scale Trains is the only manufacturer that has working class lights that actually are clear green and red, which is really, really cool. F6 is the ditch light, so this locomotive is not equipped with ditch lights. F7 will be the beacon on top. Again, that's an LED beacon. Kind of a nice little feature for this particular locomotive. Turn that off. F8, again, it initiates the shutdown sequence. It will also essentially mute the locomotive when it's moving. F9 is going to be drive hold. F10 is independent brake. F11 are going to be the radiator fans. Hit those. So you can hear the fans moving. F12 is the light dimmer, so we'll go ahead and hit the headlights back on. Hit F12, you can see the headlights dim. F13 is going to be the spitter valve. F16 is the spitter at shutdown, so you can hear that right now. F17 is the brake set release. F18 is sanding valve. F19 is the air let off. And F20 is the compressor. So those are the functions on this particular locomotive. So let's go ahead and re-engage the prime mover here. And we're going to take it for a little test run around the layout. Okay, the initial first impressions of this locomotive are very, very positive. Great running locomotive. Tremendous attention to detail. It's going to take me a long time to just sort of stare at this thing and just notice all the subtle details that it has on it. Sounds great. I don't think I mentioned it earlier. It's a LokSound full throttle decoder. Sounds fantastic. I can't wait to get this thing set up for my ProtoThrottle. So next I'm going to take and hook it up to my LokProgrammer, and we're going to go ahead and get this set up so we can run it with ProtoThrottle. I don't know if I've ever shown this before, but here's my setup for my LokProgrammer. So got the locomotive sitting on here already, obviously, but there's just a piece of 9-inch straight track underneath there. I built this little jig, I guess, if you will, where I was able to mount the track, run the wires underneath the track, hook it up to the LokProgrammer, run my power out, USB out to the computer, and then here I have my computer set up right here. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is open up the LokProgrammer software. And so I have my locomotive on the programming track. Let's go ahead and read the decoder. Usually takes it about 15 or so seconds to read the, all of the information on the decoder. So here's my default. Very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to save this project, and I'm going to save this as the road number 6305. So the default short address is 3. We're going to go ahead and change this to our long address. It comes default out of the package at 128, so let's change this to 6305. And I'm going to go ahead and write the decoder. So that is going to be saved. And then as soon as this is done saving, we're going to go ahead and come down here and click on this function map tab to take a look at the functions. Okay, let's go ahead and click on the function map. This SD40-2 is an old Milwaukee unit. So one of the first things we're going to see here is for F1 the bell. This is prototypical, specific for this particular locomotive. It has a Milwaukee electronic bell on it. The Leslie S3L horn, prototypically correct. Another unique feature for this particular unit, it has the Stratolite beacon, and that's identified here for F7, how the physical outputs are configured. We have our prime mover for function 8, so it'll turn on and off, cycle through the on-off sequence. F10 is the independent brake. I kind of demonstrated all of these right out of the package. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to get this set up for the ProtoThrottle. So the first thing I'm going to do is disable the front and the directionality of the front and rear headlight. So you can see F0 forward is the front. I'm going to go ahead and click on this. We are going to ignore the direction. So F0 is going to be on, and it is going to be on for the front headlight, which is what I want. So then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to delete this line altogether. So if you just highlight it over here in the left column, click on this red X to delete it, because now basically essentially what I've just done is I've programmed this for F0 to be only the front headlight and have that on constantly, irrespective of the direction of the locomotive. So the next thing I'm going to do is I need to program the rear light to an open function. The first open function I have is function 14. So I'm just going to come over here to the physical outputs column, click on it, drop down tab. I want the rear light number 1 checked. So I'm going to select that. That's on F14. Again, we're going to want that to be on at a regardless of the directionality of the locomotive. So we'll go ahead and leave that as it is. One of the things, and again, this is my specific preference, how this locomotive is set up. The number board's automatically turned on. I don't know if you noticed that when I use my Digitrax throttle, the number boards come on basically when you cycle the prime mover on. So I am going to disable that. F8 will still power on the prime mover, but I'm going to assign the number boards to an open function. This came pre-programmed for F6 to be the auxiliary ditch lights. Well, this particular model does not have ditch lights, so I can actually disable all of this. So those are disabled. And now the physical output, so this is just going to be, I'm actually going to change this. It's forward F6. The direction is going to be ignored. And essentially I want F6 to be on. I'm going to delete this row here, the reverse F6, like what I did with the headlight. And I'm going to make the physical output on this to be the number boards, which is auxiliary 1. And again, no sound function associated with that. So let's go ahead and click on write decoder data, and we're going to let this write. One thing I'll real quick mention, I don't know if you noticed, this is F6, not F12. F12 is the dimmer, so basically what this does is when the dimmer is enabled, it's not going to dim the number boards, which is what I want. It's prototypically correct. Next thing I'm going to do real quick is I'm just going to come down here and click on the sound slot settings. This is a nice function of the LokProgrammer. You can preview the sound of whatever sound slot that is. So sound slot 1 is the prime mover. Give the computer a second here to catch up. So you can hear the prime mover. It's going through its startup sequence. I'm going to stop it. Right now the volume is at CV value 128, which is 100%. I think if you watched any of my videos, you pretty much know that I like to soften the sound a little bit, just because my train room is a pretty small room. I've got pretty sensitive ears, and I don't need it to rattle the windows with the volume. So I'm going to adjust the prime mover volume, and I'm also going to adjust, and I don't know if you noticed it when I did the initial fire up test run, the horn is loud, like really loud. So I'm going to come down here and I'm going to change the horn to about a 75%. We'll say 65% ish, somewhere in that ballpark. Give it a quick preview. And we'll go ahead and write that as well. So pretty simple to get the this locomotive set up for the LokProgrammer, or with the LokProgrammer for the ProtoThrottle. It's a pretty simple process. I spend a lot of my time on JMRI and really becoming pretty proficient in JMRI. The LokProgrammer is newer to me. I've had it probably 3 or 4 months now, and I'm getting better at it. I'm not going to say I'm an expert by any stretch of the imagination, but it is becoming easier for me to program some of the CVs. So that is all I need to do at this point. I'm going to save this. So I have this pre-programmed for road number 6305. So if I have to come back in here and adjust some of the settings, I can do that very easily. So let's go ahead, and I'm going to do a quick sort of mini operating session with this locomotive to wrap up this video. Okay, here I am on my ProtoThrottle. So we're going to go ahead and get started. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set my locomotive. Remember, we set our road number to be 6305. So I'll go ahead and change this to 6305. SD40-2 save. So then I'm going to come into my configuration function and change things around here a little bit. So horn is F2, which we want to save. Bell is F1, which is correct. The ProtoThrottle pulls your previous locomotive settings for the configuration. So a lot of these I'm not going to have to change. The brake is F10. Brake off, it just has to be unassigned. I'm actually going to change that to F15 because that's unassigned on this decoder. The auxiliary, which is this button up here, I want to make this my dynamic brakes, which in this case it is going to be F3, I'm sorry, not F3, dynamic brakes are F4. So let's go ahead and change that to F4. So this button is now assigned to the dynamic brakes. Engine on is F8, which is correct. This is a Lok sound. The engine stop needs to be unassigned on the ProtoThrottle. Throttle link is unassigned. Reverse swap is unassigned. Front headlight still is F0. This doesn't have ditch light, so I'm going to turn that off. The dimmer on this decoder is F12, so we need to change this to F12. Leave front dim number 2 blank. Rear headlight, if you remember, we changed that to function 14. Rear ditch again needs to be unassigned. This unit doesn't have ditch lights. Rear dim, again we'll make this F12. Rear dim 2 blank. Okay, so my up button, there's a couple things I want to do here. So for my up button, I want to make this my classification lights. Classification lights in this particular locomotive are going to be F5. And I want that latched because as you cycle through hitting F5, it's going to change from clear to green to red. My down button here, I'm going to make this the strobe light on top. So this needs to be F7. And again, it needs to be latched because when you press it, you want it to stay on. And that's it. So let's go ahead and exit out of here and save it. I'm going to come back here and I want to save this to an open slot. So I'm just going to scroll through my list of locomotives here. Slot 11 is open, so I'm going to go ahead and save it. Confirm save. Click yes. So now it is officially saved. A couple things I want to check here. I want to check my come in here and I want to check the whoops, I missed it again. Notch functions. So when the throttle's at notch 1, it's going to go to 6 speed steps. When it's at notch 2, it's going to go to 12. I'm just going to up these a little bit since this is a road unit. I'm going to go in intervals of 6. And I know I'm going to have to play around with these, but at least it'll get us a start here. Okay, so the ProtoThrottle is now configured.